This was all done in cypress and mahogany, originally designed with a copper roof. Large doors, and which were operable, that looked out onto this huge lawn that he had. The interior was also done in sheets of marine plywood with walnut inlays. You can see the mechanical system, humidification system, which were all these wooden perforated grills. There was a walking lane. His was married to Claire Bloom at the time, and she was supposed to walk with him while he went back and forth. And of course, they got divorced, and that was the end of the project. But you really can see the remnants of the intricacy of also what we were starting to explore in the fabrication of openings of doors and windows. Trying to understand what happens at the moment that the wall is opened, that light is admitted, there's this intimacy between the inside and the outside, and the response to the construction system we felt was really about the frame, which could yield in this much more intricate way, and the wooden frame inside the wall, and then the frame of the door and window, which could produce the second level of detail in the surface of the door. We did get another project. It was my swimming pool period, I assume. It was a project in Amagansett, Long Island, in addition to this builder's house, a scheme for a very large, my wife likes to call it a body of water. It was so much bigger than a pool. But it was a project, again, that was set in the landscape. First scheme was much more ambitious with stone and a lot of terracing. When the budget came in, we had to modify that. It then became a completely wooden project with a stone terrace set in the ground. You can see a drawing of the watercourses traveling through the various plunge pools, sitting pools, main swimming pool, lap lane pool. There was a small changing building here. And then finally, as it was realized here, the spillways from the main pool, it was about this incision into the landscape. The intricacy of the fence work around, which was done it was a relatively inexpensive project, was done by a repetitive pattern that was altered in 2 locations, which then allowed what appeared to be a much more random figure. If we only had laser cutters at the time we did this, it would have been much easier. But it was done with a jig and a much more old artisan's tradition, and then with copper caps on top of the structural posts. We also entered a competition for the Stonington Public Library, which was in addition to the Nathaniel Palmer Mansion. Again, the idea of the historic building and adding to the historic building, in this case, and you can just see some of the studies that we went through to look at the variations for the approach of how to come up to this building. In this case, we decided not to touch the building, which was risky. We had an archive building, a library here at the end, a little seminar room, and as part of this, we did all of the interiors, the furniture, the whole 9 yards in the preliminary design. And you can see some of that in here in the library, reading room, and the seminar room. We didn't win that one either. This is a loft in Chelsea. And as we were now moving into this phase of more durable, because I do think part of the issues about green architecture is also durability, the constant rebuilding of the environment. We were looking at materials which could actually sustain a longer life cycle. We were, at that point, looking at redoing, this was a loft for 2 artists. It was in an incredible, the building was a 115-year-old, 9-story building made completely of brick, walls and ceilings. The only thing that was wood was the floor. So we found that the room was a complete interior except for the windows at the 2 ends. And we obviously the owner had a program. We started out trying to do the bulk of it in wood with gesso plaster above. Here you can look through the master bathrooms, bedrooms, their studio in the front, a kind of cutaway drawing. And when the budget came in, we had to take some of it away, but we did realize a fair amount of it. And you can see the more elaborate woodwork now, which protects and makes more durable all of the every edge of this loft as you move through it. We left the brick enclosure. We sandblasted it down. It was an absolutely exquisite room, incredible density, and we tried to match it with the pieces that we put in, and also have light that moved from one space to the other, so you would always know when there was an occupant of another room. The details were fairly elaborate, down to the screw fasteners and the groupings and how they were organized, passages from space to space, social spaces for the family, whether it's off the kitchen, passages into the master bedroom, and the furniture, which we also did. In this case, all the cabinets and casework, which were all done in machined plywood. We also did a fair amount of curatorial work. This is a set of exhibits that we did for both Frank Lloyd Wright and Carlo Scarpa. I say it only because they were great learning experiences for me. In both cases, I had worked both as co-curator and an installation designer. In this case, we also built a set of architectural models of, this was a show of 5 unbuilt projects of Frank Lloyd Wright from the 1920s. David DeLong was the historian and curator. David had, his thesis was that these really were key projects that held the seeds to all of the work which Wright did in the last 20 or 30 years of his life. So I just show you 2 of these. This one of them had a full set of drawings, Gordon Strong. We also, there was the Inn in the Desert, which had a full set of working drawings. This one had 5 or 7 sketches. This is the Lake Tahoe project, speculative project that Wright just dreamt up, hoping to get interest of client, with this incredible idea that you would let barges loose in the lake. They didn't have motors in them. And then at some point at the end of the day, a motor launch would go out and kind of pull the people back into the inn, which was here. And then he had these cottages dotted up through the landscape. It was a very, very amazing project, the Doheny Ranch. It was a very interesting group. And really incredible, because Wright at that period didn't use models all that much as a design tool as much as other people did later on. And it was the exactness, the accuracy of Wright's drawings, even in sketches, was really profound to see, sketched on top of topos. And when you saw where the perspectives were taken, he got exactly the result that he did. We had a very quick installation at the Whitney Museum, mostly graphic. It was very little of the actual. The show had to be put up in 3 days, so it was mostly silkscreen graphics. But also we did some of the furniture installations for that. We actually then started to be interviewed for projects on college campuses and institutions, and this was really confronting now the criticism that I was starting to hear about institutional work. These were, in some cases, historic campuses. This is Queens College. There was a historic center to the college, which were these old mission-style gesso buildings. There was a brutalist building on the campus, which was kind of persona non grata. The administration hated the building. There was an open lawn. Raphael Vignoli was designing an underground AIDS research building for Luc Montagnier, who was being negotiated to go to Queens College at that time. And they asked us to do a preliminary design for a study for an addition to the Student Union building, both masking this from the campus and also eventually removing these temporary buildings that were then 45 years old, these 2 Quonset huts. It was a building with a 450-seat theater. It had seminar rooms, rentable seminar rooms, and then restaurant facilities, rathskellers throughout. More importantly, was a landscape passage from Casino Boulevard, which was the entrance and bus stop and arrival for students coming by public transportation, through a treed arcade, through sculpture gardens, through water courses, and then finally into the main plaza before entering into the building. Sections through the building show a very spatial matrix, 2- and 3-story spaces moving through, light monitors and wells in all the seminar rooms above, and then the theater here in the big 450-seat theater through the other end of the leg of the L configuration. We started to look at making the building in stone. This was all to be done in limestone. At that point, we were embarking on wooden windows, copper, a much richer, much more permanent material palette than we had used before. And I show this because the duality of my practice has been that we either do very, very small things or really huge things. This was a grave marker for one of our other clients who had a death in the family. Asked us to do this stone. It's a 5-foot square chunk of granite, and this is both a combination of hand-hammered stone. It's a single piece. The front is done on a laser cutter, so all the graphics and the decorative elements were given on a computer file, which the water jet laser cut in, and then this is hand-hammered by the artisans. This is a little renovation we did in Bedford, New York. It's a project which goes through a house which had multiple renovations to it. Very simple set of additions, but had all of this idea about water removal from the house, going back into the ground, coming through these copper scuppers and water troughs, through limestone drainage basins, and then out back into the land. These are in some cases minor, in some cases major interventions in the building. This is all made in mahogany and limestone. This is a screen porch. It was all knitted into an existing structure. Nothing was demolished except the entire back wall of the house, which you'll see. This is a stone pattern, all done from scratch, all cut in a shop, and then field installed. These are the base pieces that support the mahogany screen panels, the water basins, and then the back wall of the building, which has a piece of the dining room which projects out of the building. Was a tiny little salt box of a house, very dark, so the back wall was transformed structurally, and we had a phalanx of doors that could open up, and the entire house actually could ventilate itself in spring and fall. And you can see some of the detailing here in the water spouts, the water removal, the structure for the mahogany posts now carrying the house, and then the water troughs, which drop kind of amazingly into those basins. There are brass beads between each of these, and then copper caps over the top of all the exterior walls. We also did some of the interior. There was a suite of rooms upstairs, dressing rooms and cabinet work, which we did for light fixtures, which we did for the owner. As was mentioned earlier, we did the same curatorial activity for the Canadian Center with Phyllis Lambert and Mildred Friedman, who was the guest curator for the show of Carlo Scarpa. In this case, we actually built a set of models of some of Scarpa's projects. Great controversy about some of the models we chose because we felt they held keys people felt were not, some of the curators felt were not that significant. There was one for a house that Scarpa had done. It was the only freestanding building in his career, which we felt was very important, a house in Udine. And as well, there was a huge fight over the bank in Verona. In any event, we prevailed. The show was organized in a very interesting way. We had decided that the only thing that would be on the wall was Scarpa's drawings. The drawings were an astonishing set of drawings. So they're in frames that we designed and organized in the exhibit of the work. There was commissioned a set of photographs by Guido Guidi, well-known Italian photographer, and those are in these steel easels, which sit on the floor. He wanted you to not look at the drawings as you looked at the photographs, so we had them at a height and at a tilt enough so that you had to actually look down to look at them, and then there were the models which were made here, and you can see, and then there was actually one of Scarpa's own easels as part of the show. This is a model of the Vecchio in Verona, and here you can see the freestanding house, which also, again, was so referenced by Frank Lloyd Wright and held so many of the keys to his later work, especially the Brion Cemetery, that we felt very strongly that that project should be included. It was also on this extraordinary site. I think it was 30 feet wide and about 200 feet long, so it was a very interesting site plan, the way it was set in the community. We also did an array of other renovations, these in stages. This was a piece that came up into a penthouse, which we're about to do the roof piece to. This was a modernization of an old two-bedroom apartment below, and it was really weaving the three pieces together. These are just some of the study drawings of the stair element that winds through the three floors of the construction. Some of the woodwork, which really started to now explore the 2, 3, and 4 levels of plywood. Lighting built in as part of it, much more elaborate screw assemblies. And then finally the roof piece, which is to be done hopefully next year, which is a master bedroom and children's bedroom suite on top. What you were looking at was a little two-bedroom, a little one-bedroom apartment down here that was turned into 3 bedrooms. They have this half of the roof, and this is a tiny little roof monitor, and had gotten permission to build up onto the top of this roof. This is all done in copper, or will be done in copper. We've also done glassware. This for the Murano Glass Company in Italy. This was an exhibit. Was looking at this is hand-blown glass. These are chips of amethyst embedded in here. This was a spillway cup. We did actually, I think, 20 or so different kinds of glassware. They decided on this wine goblet, but you can see it here in elevation and here close up. And again, the tactility of it was very important. The texture of these precious pieces of stone as they're emerging out of the glass. I'm going to run through a handful of quick projects, and as we're finishing up, this is a house which we've been working on for a very long time. It's an enormous house out in the landscape. Started from an array of sketches and studies about looking at ways to build in an extremely cold weather climate. This is upstate New York. This is a house that has grown dramatically from a little cottage at one end to now being a very large 3-bedroom house of about 8,000 square feet, including a very large indoor swimming pool complex. You can see the organization of this is a room that looks out over a tremendous landscape. There's a reception room as you come in